All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Gamers8 here as we have ourselves our next Legends match on the way as Jaedong is going to go up against Stork. Another best of three to figure out who gets an opportunity and have a crack at Fantasy. Joining me here, ZG as well as Dan to get things going over Artosis way. And let's just start with it here. We've got Jaedong going up against Stork here, Artosis, on this stage, live in Riyadh. I'm an excited boy.
Oh, well, I mean, you should be.
Yes.
These are literally two of the greatest four players of all time.
Yeah.
You know, we have three of those here. Funnily enough, one of them didn't make it to the finals, but one of these guys will, and either one is going to be a great match. Stork versus Jaedong. Like, it's literally the second best Protoss ever against the best Zerg ever, and they're both in good shape. They both just made it into ASL. Awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, like when you look at the kind of great rivalries of Brood War and things like that, okay, yeah, people look at Jaedong and Flash as kind of that big rivalry and things like that. For Stork and Jaedong, you know, they had their moments here in the past of Brood War Zombie Group. They went up against one another, and Jaedong, even to some degree, made his name off of Stork in some ways.
Yeah, I guess so, but it's kind of hard to say like that was only one person. Right?
No, of course, it's multiple people.
I mean, people would definitely argue that Flash and Jaedong definitely made like each other, you know, like a building block of stuff. But Stork has actually been there from the beginning to kind of, I don't know if this is rude to say, but like almost like kind of help the other guys they came in. Because I think he's actually one of the oldest pros.
Yeah, yeah.
Like he was there before they were in prominent area, I suppose, in Brood War. So then whenever people would go up against him, it'd always be like, are they going to be good? And then they are good, and then they're going to continue to be good. So, you know, it's kind of funny kind of thinking him as a, I guess like almost father is kind of a weird thing to say, but someone that you stack up against and that's proven, and then you actually maybe even start to defeat him more often, and then suddenly you're like the big dog in the Brood War, and he's actually a little less, and then now we're here a decade later, and Jaedong is certainly still one of the more famous, I suppose, but Stork, as Artosis was saying, still makes an ASL and is still very good.
Definitely so. Dan, when you look at kind of on the flip side with Jaedong, I mean, where do we even begin when it comes to the legacy of someone like Jaedong? It is very difficult for me to even say, okay, yeah, this is where he was able to, you know, kind of make his name. This is where he was able to have his biggest victory, because there's too many to list.
There really, truly is. Like when I say the greatest Zerg ever, I mean it. And in fact, he was pretty close to having a title similar to that at one point in StarCraft 2 even. I mean, this guy is one of the most talented RTS players of all time, absolutely beloved. You know, he started out being known as the Legend Killer. That doesn't even make sense for him anymore, and they had to give him new nicknames, the Tyrant, because he became the Legend. You know, he's unbelievably good. He's still practicing really, really hard right now. In fact, he did mention that this year he is giving it his all.
Oh, really?
He is trying his absolute best this year to try to have good results.
Yeah, because his ASLs, I think the last one he was like, what, 5th through 8th or something like that?
Yeah, so I think he went out in the round of 16, if I'm remembering correctly. Okay. But yeah, I mean, he's making it into ASLs, but we don't quite have that really deep finish.
Yeah, you would like to see that kind of the return to prominence, as it were. Well, before we actually get to this series, we can hear from Jaedong's opponent, of course, Stork, as we get into our next match.
One thing to note about Stork is he's always been around. He's always been very good. He hasn't always been on top of the world, but he's definitely been a threat to any player he goes up against, and so he does have a real shot here at Gamers8.
일단은 그 처음에 이제 사우디아라비아에서 대회가 열린다고 했을 때 제가 스타1이랑 스타2 둘 다 이제 대회를 해외 대회를 많이 참가해봤는데 유럽이나 아시아 그리고 미국권 뭐 이렇게는 대회를 많이 해봤는데 여기 사우디에서 대회가 열린다고 하는 거는 되게 의외였거든요. 그래서 되게 신기했고 꼭 참가하고 싶었어요.
When I was a kid, if I could get my hands on a Stork replay, I would. I would sit there and look over it for sometimes an hour and try to figure out all the little things he would do that were just a little bit better than other players. The way he would place the buildings, when he would stop workers and cut them to maybe make an expansion sooner. And so it's cool to see that he's survived for this long. StarCraft 1 is the oldest esport, quarter of a century, 25 years old, and he's still able to compete today.
일단 게이머즈 8에서 사우디아라비아에 처음 이제 와서 경기를 하는 거기 때문에 승리하는 모습을 꼭 보여주고 싶고 이제 스타크래프트 1을 이 나라에서도 좋아하시는 분이 있을 거라고 생각하는데 저에 대해서 이제 많이 보여드리고 가고 싶습니다.
Stork's a really interesting player in that his defining characteristics are really how he changed a few little things in openers and optimized the way that the game would start. If you look at the history of StarCraft, there's all these different openings or build orders as they call them. And what Stork did is he always figured out a way to get, a couple seconds ahead, to shave off a minute and get something out a little bit quicker. And without him, I think the whole game would have developed entirely differently.
제가 생각하기에는 이제 저의 선수 커리어에서 제일 중요했던 시기 2007년, 2008년이 맞고요. 그리고 그때 성적이 제일 좋았던 것도 맞는 것 같습니다. 이제 개인 대회 우승도 하고 준우승도 하고 결승도 많이 갔고 팀 단위 대회도 우승을 하고 MVP도 받았었기 때문에 제일 중요했고.
One thing about Stork is that he is always full of surprises. And so when it comes to surviving and coming on top of Gamers8, he's very good at planning versus the players he's up against. And this Invitational doesn't have that many players, so he's definitely got a shot.
일단은 제가 선수 생활을 하면서 이렇게 열심히 하는데 원동력이 될 수 있었던 팬분들이 응원을 열심히 해준 덕분에 여기까지 올 수 있었던 것 같아요.
Well, let's see if he can stack up against Jaedong here on the opposite side, Dan. You have obviously covered this for a long time. What are your most memorable Stork moments from the past?
Oh, I have a lot of Stork moments. I remember watching him when I lived back in New Hampshire, in these pro league matches and everything. One that really, I think about it every time I think about Stork, just because being an angry Terran player, he flew a shuttle that had 4 DTs over a missile turret. It died. This was at the beginning of the game. You would think he would lose because of that. No, I came back and won with carriers, and I remember being very upset.
Of course, this is his memory.
Yeah, no, that's one of my most prominent memories. Of course, him winning Star Leagues and stuff too is up there.
I mean, this isn't just a prominent memory. This was one of your core traumas in life. I feel.
One of my core traumas.
Wow.
For other people, those traumas are caused by their parents. For me, they're mostly caused by Stork and Bisu.
Nice. How about, I guess, the ZG? Do you want to talk a little bit more about Stork?
I mean,
that was what I was expecting.
Yeah, the nice thing I'm going to bring up that I guess because we're all avoiding his actual accomplishments for some reason, but he's super accomplished. But I actually remember being in awe of meeting him at a BlizzCon once, back when I was a little babby fan. Actually, I had just gotten into Brood War thanks to some friends, and he was the super nice guy. He actually sat down impromptu, right? Didn't even know, and he's just like, "Oh, hey, I'm Stork," and I was like, "Oh," it was very exciting. And the same thing later when I was in Korea. He was like, "Oh, hey, I recognize you."
No way.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he's such a nice guy.
What a guy. But legends all the same. Let's get to it. Jaedong versus Stork, best of 3. Who moves on to the final? We're about to find out here at Gamers8.
We've got another one coming up, Fancy, that is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. The best Zerg in the world versus an incredible Protoss. Potentially the best. I don't know, we got 2 really good Protoss. I don't want to pick between them here.
I mean, honestly, a lot of people call him the godfather of all Zerg players. أعزائنا المشاهدين، المباراة هذه بتكون جدا مميزة لأنه حرفيا الشخصين هذولي ما هو بس متقاعدين من عام 2012، ما هو بس ما قد تواجهوا من فترات جدا طويلة، لكن الشيء الحلو في الموضوع انهم تواجهوا في بداية السنة هذه في شو ماتش كانت غريبة جدا، ومع كذا في واحد منهم فاز. راح نتكلم عن الموضوع، لكن المباراة هذه توقف منها أي شيء.
What's thrilling about these 2 players is they both have some recent history against each other, as recent as January.
It's like you understood what I said in Arabic. That's exactly what I said.
I speak Arabic. Did you know that?
أعزائنا المشاهدين، زي ما احنا عارفين بنشوف وش اللي ممكن يصير في هذه المباراة، خصوصا انه بما اننا عارفين انه جايدونغ هو يعتبر من افضل الزرق بلايرز، الا انه في المباراة هذه ما راح يستفيد من الخصوصية هذه، خصوصا انه اللي ضده بيكون تيرن بلاير، فالشيء هذا بيخلي استراتيجياته لازم تتغير وما راح يستفيد منها بشكل كبير، مع انه متخصص مرة هو بالZVZ ماتش اب. Did you understand that?
No, I didn't get that one. You went a little fast on that one. But I got a lot about how great Jaedong is at Zerg. And, Stork pretty good at Protoss. I think we covered both those bases. But I think both of them are ready to give you a bit of a masterclass in what that looks like.
I mean, let's welcome them on stage because that's what we need right now. أعزائنا المشاهدين، اللاعبين هذول جاهزين الآن، هم في الباك ستيج بيطلعون لكم الآن، وراح نشوف وش اللي ممكن يقدمونه في هذه المباراة، لأن الفائز بيروح على طول للفاينل.
Let's bring them on out. The legend, Stork! He's known for his macro style and strong control, a pioneer of PvT, but that's not going to help him against the best Zerg in the world. He's the winner of the 2009 and 2007 OSL finals, and it was close. Jaedong took him out in the 2007 finals and the 2008 WCG Korea finals. Bit of a chip on his shoulder in this one, but he's holding the winning record as of January.
ستارك وصل للمسرح أعزائي المشاهدين. بينه وبين جيدون كمية هيستوري جدا عظيم. في عام 2007-2008 كان في فرصة إنه واحد منهم بياخذ البطولة، ولكن بالأخير جيدونغ هو اللي فاز عليه، فهو جاي يصفي الحسابات الآن هنا في المسرح معنا في جيمرز 8. لكن خلونا نرحب في اللاعب الثاني، كلنا نعرف من بيكون بس لازم نشوفه على المسرح. رحبوا معنا ب The Legend جيدونغ. جيدونغ المعروف عنه انه هو افضل لاعب زرق في العالم، الشخص اللي هو يعتبر الشخص اللي قدر يسوي كل استراتيجيات الزرق اللي نشوفها اليوم، حتى هو الشخص اللي قدر انه يطلع كل لاعبين الزرق اللي نشهدهم اليوم، الكل بيتعلم منه، هو حرفيا الماستر حقهم، هو حرفيا الشخص اللي خلى الزرق هو اللي الريس اللي احنا نشوفه اليوم في كل البطولات الاخيره. لكن لا ننسى انه هو في الفتره الاخيره في عام 2023 السنه هذه في جانوري واجه ستورك وخسر قدامه في مباراه كانت غريبه جدا، اخذ عليه المباراه على طول 1-0.
He's accomplished in both Brood War and StarCraft 2. He's going to bring his all. That's a very scary statement to this tournament. He's the winner of 5 major titles, including Star Leagues, MSLs, and also the WCG 2009, where all of these players did throw down in the grand finals.
حرفيا اكثر من 5 بطولات عالميه قدر انه يكسبها في عام 2007 الى 2010، لكن في 2012 اللاعب هذا توقف انه يلعب، واليوم راجع لنا على المسرح هذا يورينا ايش ممكن يسويه في الشو ماتش، لكن لازم اننا نشوف شو ممكن يسوونه في هذه المباراه بالذات، لان الفائز منهم على طول على النهائي بينافسون على اللاين شير من $50,000.
Jaedong, Stork, please join us center stage to shake hands.
هذه التحية ما شفناها من فترة جدا طويلة، لكن راح نشهدها اليوم في الرياض في جيمرز 8، فخلونا على طول نروح نشوف مين اللي منهم بيتأهل للفاينل، لأن فانتسي ينتظرهم، واحد منهم يبي يتقدم بيكون ضده على طول مع المعلقين.
We'll find out if Jaedong can hold on to his streak of titles or if Stork is coming through to pick up those online wins he's been grabbing. Let's watch this next match.
What is up, everybody? This is Tasteless. Joined with me is Ben, and we are going to go into the other side of the Final Four here to decide which of these two is going to go on to the finals to face off against Fantasy. This is a best-of-3 between Stork and Jaedong.
I mean, this is amazing for me to get to see these guys, you know, like I got to compete against both of these guys in StarCraft 2, then I get to see them go back to their origins kind of thing, see where they really made a name for themselves. I was a teammate with Jaedong, still a very good friend of his, and it's absolutely wonderful to be here, Nick.
It's a treat, man. It's very cool that Gamers8 is hosting this Legends match, and to see these two guys on the stage duking it out. I was surprised at how short the Fantasy Bisu match was. Fingers crossed we have a little bit of a more developed game, but clearly Fantasy had planned out quite a bit. I will say that I think that Jaedong is overall probably a stronger player than Stork. If they had to play 100 games, I think it's pretty clear Jaedong would come out on top, but a best-of-3 is a very, very different beast. Introducing our first player in the upper right, in the red, our Zerg, he is Jaedong.
And spawning over in top left as our blue Protoss, it is Stork. Stork, obviously known as the dinosaur toss from old. You know, a lot of players were very, very fast and quick, and Stork, he was just slow and methodical about his approach, and he's always done things his way, as you were saying in the interviews with the players beforehand, but he's always been very solid and well-rounded at what he does.
Yeah, he's really understood a lot of the ways the game works before other players, but you know, one thing about that style is that people learn from it and take it, right? It's not something that you always get to keep as your own. You're in some ways educating the masses of pros more so than being so skilled at something that you have access to a certain trait that nobody else can get, right? So Stork still always a threat here. A lot of times it does seem like in many of the modern competitive games that I see, he is trying to play around the strengths of the player rather than try to go head-to-head versus them. Little subtle thing, by the way, Jaedong sends the Overlord down and just waits to see if the probe comes in that direction, so he actually parks it. If he sees it, then he turns the Overlord the other direction. Otherwise, he would keep scouting to the south.
And how important is this, going for a pool first in this situation? I know it's a 4-player map, so you can technically spawn anywhere, right? But getting to scout this first for Stork, this is obviously quite a big deal. Quite fortunate for him.
It's pretty handy, right? Especially if he's going to go for the Forge opening. There are basically 2 main line openings for fast expand for PvZ. One is Gateway opening, which is a little bit more common as of late. The other is Forge, which is older, but obviously you can still do it in the modern era. Even against the very best player in the whole world, it still has a shot. So because Stork spots him right away, he is going to see exactly when the Lings are going to hatch. So Stork cuts workers at 13, makes a Nexus, and he will literally just by a second have the cannon out in time to not die to the Lings. If he does make a bunch of Lings and send them across the map, he might not.
Yeah, like shields also work very differently in this game. This probe isn't quite as durable as a StarCraft 2 probe. The shields regenerate continuously, but very slowly, whereas in StarCraft 2, out of combat, they regenerate very quickly. But it's nice to see all this micro going on. Like if you micro these workers correctly, have that little bit of a range attacking going on, and this probe can actually survive for a long time and just scout continuously for Stork, and it's just a little nuisance for Jaedong.
Yeah, you know, it's something about the pathing in StarCraft 1 where the more input you put into the unit, the more you get out of it. So Jaedong has to really try to micro to get damage off on that, which allows Stork to keep orbiting and checking around. And Stork's going to send a second probe out. I assume Jaedong sees it, but you never know, right? And he'll try to hide that somewhere to try to check and confirm what Jaedong's doing. Basically, Jaedong has a couple options. He can play normal and tech up, where he could go for some kind of a Hydra bust.
I mean, he's taken 3 bases very quickly. Like, this is reminiscent of StarCraft 2 Zerg, but maybe even extra, where that 3rd base is going to be at the 3 o'clock location. And droning up, like Zergs in this game, they tend to have very few drones on each base, but just taking a lot of bases. So those bases last a long time. Protoss, on the other hand, they'll probe up like crazy and have so many probes running off minimal bases, but then they can just pump out units like crazy. And Zerg have to be very careful about the aggression that's going to be thrown at them.
So he actually used that second probe that was out on the map and used that to right-click onto the minerals that we're scouting. It's good because when you right-click on minerals, the worker goes through everything. And so as he sent the first probe out, the second probe was able to move through the mineral patches, or through the Zerglings onto the mineral patch, and he scouts the layers. So the first thing that Stork had to find, he confirmed. This is not a cheese, this is not a time and attack. This is going to be a Zerg that wants to try to develop. And so the Protoss can breathe a sigh of relief and tech on his side. And so we're going to have a moment where neither side can really interact with each other, as they're both going to try to develop their own techs.
Stargate will be the tech of choice here for Stork, and you know, that does not usually lead into scouts. I mean, like, players have used it in the past where it's been like a bit of a memey thing. Kind of a terrible unit in this game overall, but Corsairs usually are the unit of choice, and a Spire on the way for Jaedong as well.
Yeah, and so the Corsair can continue to scout. It can counter Muta play. When you see a Spire coming, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have mass Mutas. You can get Scourge and try to scout with that. And so we've got the +1 weapons attack coming here. And so far, we're basically going to go into a more standard game. We're going
super different than the previous series, right? Like, Fantasy was just all about, hey, I'm going to all-in you with this, like, 1-base build, the 2-base build, and really kind of utilize the stage and the presence, and maybe these guys being not out of shape, but, you know, it's not every day you get to play in Saudi Arabia on a big stage, and these guys, totally different approaches here.
And it looks like more hatcheries are going to come down, and this is where the Zerg is really beginning to develop. Every hatchery placement is deliberate, by the way. With Zerg, because the main starting units that Protoss have on the ground are Zealots, you can really abuse turtling. That's one of the unique things about this matchup out of all the StarCrafts, is both sides are using only melee units to start. And so the Protoss, you can see, they get their wall-in set up, they turtle in that regard and use a cannon. The Zergs later on set up hatcheries in a sunken colony and use the other structures to turtle behind that. Now the Corsair comes out, and you can usually get one Overlord kill, not always, but you also want to try to figure out, okay, is there any obvious tech or any surprises that are coming my way, so I can be ready for that.
Ooh, and a Hydralisk Den is finished at this third base as well, and this Corsair will get to scout that out as well. It's quite important for Stork to know exactly what he's up against. I'm not sure if he's scouted the Spire just yet either, but a couple of Scourge on the way as well. Going to be hunting for that Corsair just to eliminate it from the game.
Yeah, it's not always easy to get the Corsairs back. In fact, I feel like this might be a little bit too ambitious here for Stork. He's going to get that one now. He knows he has to get back. So we want to watch this very carefully. The trajectory of not just this Scourge, but north of this shot over here, there's Scourge on the map right there, and he's going to try to connect into that. Now, if Stork is going to try to accumulate Corsairs, he has to make sure he gets both of these back, and so he's going to try to catch this one. Can this juke and jive, can this zig and zag, and try to get out of here? He eats one shot, so one more will take it out. Meanwhile, the other escapes.
I mean, overall, how do you think this feels for both these players? Because, I mean, obviously you want to grow that Corsair count. They are quite an expensive unit, but fairly valuable. Is Stork going to be able to, I was going to say, is he going to be able to get away? No, not against the Dong.
Yeah, a great move there by Jaedong to intercept that and shut it down. And so one Corsair down. Not great, not the end of the world either, right? This is playable for both sides. Jaedong is in the phase now where he could probably park making more drones and instead start to really mass up a bunch of Hydras. Over here for Stork, I mean, everything's looking very normal. I believe that should be the +1 air attack upgrade finishing, by the way. He does see the Templar Archives. I think it might have just finished, actually. So yeah, he does have that +1 air weapons. Normally 5 Corsairs can kill a Scourge before it hits you with +1. This is 3. So you got to be careful.
Super careful. I mean, the Hydras will be able to save these Overlords for some time, but maybe... Oh, and DT's on the field as well. I'm always amazed by how good DTs are in this game, because you tell me Overseers have, or rather Overlords have detection immediately, and it's like somehow DTs seem to get damage done. This one didn't at all, though, and Stork was making a lot of cannons at his front wall there, so he is sort of prepared for this, but that's a lot of Hydras here.
Yeah, we have the probes that are pulled here. 4 cannons is usually the number that you can buy a little bit of time, but you also need to have that Psy Storm, and we can see more probes are going to be pulled. He's going to try to drag these through the Hydras and trip them up and try to get any kills that he can get. But I don't know, man. I mean, he might just die outright here because I see 1 cannon. I don't think Storm's okay. Storm's done, but is it too late? You need some supplementary units here to try to fight this. We have some more Zealots coming out. We should have a second Storm inbound here. It looks like instead Jaedong wants to go for the Forge.
I mean, this is brutal for Stork. Like, in this game, it's very different to StarCraft 2. The Protoss wants to be very far ahead in supply, and right now you see they're both neck and neck. That was so much eco damage for Stork, and he was decently prepared, but that Storm just a few seconds away from being done, and Jaedong with an excellent timing against all of this.
Yeah, I think that actually Stork's going to be fine. It seems like Jaedong wasn't committed to trying to do much more damage. It's kind of normal that you send Hydras out of that phase. A lot of times you can get the Forge or the Gateway, and then when they storm you try to run away and then run back in. But I got to say, that was a lot of cannon kills. You know, a lot of Zealots were shaved off there. But Stork seems to be an okay recovery. That being said, I mean, the truth is Jaedong has not even really taken a scratch yet, right?
No, he hasn't. I mean, he's lost a few Overlords here and there, but that is still a very respectable number of Hydras, and they micro so well against the melee units, just moving away little blocks, then you see the other Hydras still shooting. But Stork with Storm available, this is not StarCraft 2 Storm. This Storm actually packs a massive punch. And these Hydras, very brittle units. And honestly, as the Protoss army keeps on climbing, these Zealots are very good at tanking the Hydras. And with units like Archons and High Templars in the back line, Stork is absolutely still in this.
Yeah, he's got a shot. He's got his gateways kicking in. He's looking for fights. I don't know, where did the other Corsairs go? It seems like he only has 1 now. He might have lost the rest.
That would be
somewhere
sad.
In this game.
Yeah, that would be super sad if that is the case, but there is little engagements going on. The High Templar count's getting decent. He's got at least 3 Storms here, and you can see how well these Zealots tank against this army, actually, right here.
Yeah, Stork pretty patient with the Storms. He wants to wait until he finds a real sweet spot like that one right there. That was sick. Gets all but 1 Hydra. He's going to morph this, but I don't see a lot over here, and I feel like maybe it would have been better to try to just spam out your Psy Storms and wait, and then go back home. And look at the micro. Every damaged Hydra turns into a Lurker. Now, the Pathian will not default onto the egg. It'll always attack something else. And so Jaedong's handling this basically perfectly.
He's microing absolutely solid. It's so hard to do in this game. You can only have 12 units per group kind of thing, or select 12 units max, and look at this. These Hydras, GG is called. Splitting them like Marines in StarCraft 2. What a game from the Dong.
So, Jaedong always looks mad when he wins, by the way.
Yeah. You know, he's such a happy guy in person, but as soon as he's in the game, his face and his mentality just goes to another realm, doesn't it?
Yeah. Okay, so that game might be a little bit confusing to the casual observer because it doesn't seem like a whole lot happened. First of all, Stork did literally just tap out. He felt like he was behind enough. I think we missed seeing the Corsairs get killed for one, which makes it just kind of a harder game, especially for +1 air attack. You really can't afford to lose Corsairs at all if you're going to do that. This attack did way more damage. It seems like Storm was a few seconds later. And so we had a lot of workers that were just killed. This attack, by the way, I don't know. I mean, it just wasn't going to get anything done. There just aren't enough zealots here with the group. And so overall, honestly, as hype as this matchup is, a disappointing game here from Stork.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm so surprised how fast the cannons pop, you know? Like those 4 cannons they had behind those gateways, and it was just like the Hydras, as soon as they got in range, you could really tell like how the urgency from Stork's side where he pulls the probes and stuff, which aren't the best at dealing with the Hydras, but just trying to stay alive just for a little bit there. But Jaedong with that timing attack, and it wasn't the most all-in attack by any means. He was absolutely flourishing behind it all. Very nice play out of him. The Spy had just been utilized for those Scourge early on just to deflect the Corsair a little bit, but then really good scouting as well. You saw when he went and scouted that Citadel and seeing the Templar Archives, and it really felt like that was the go-go for Jaedong, knowing when he could attack and for how long for.
Yeah, and it's subtle, but he might have even seen the Templar Archives was maybe even a little bit late or something and thought, okay, maybe I can run up here and actually hit that. It's so important. I think the time is like 6:30 to get the Templar Archives and Storm out. You need to get it right there. Without Storm, there just isn't really a way for Protoss to play the game in the long run. And so, yeah, I mean, honestly, not a good game here from Stork. And one might say, well, why doesn't he play for longer? I mean, he was pretty dead there.
Yeah, I mean, he got forced into a position where it's like, okay, what do? I have to do something a bit crazy. He went on that counter-attack, and I think he actually made it look pretty close. Some of the storms were really good. He'd land it behind the Hydralisk where they're going to run away from the Zealots, so they had to run through it, and then one of those storms killing like a good 7-8 Hydras in one go. I mean, he made a game out of what was a really bad situation for him. Those Corsairs, I think we saw them for a brief moment at that 3 o'clock base, just as Hydras were spawning, and maybe due to the urgency of looking back home, Jaedong's pace and tempo just caught Stork off guard, I feel.
Yeah, Stork was losing on all these little fronts, right? And you know, if you're going to be able to hang as Protoss, you have to, kind of like, you know, when Terrans get beat up a lot in Terran versus Protoss, the Protoss gets beat up a lot in Protoss versus Zerg. And so you need to be able to get into a game where you're going to have viability.
Yeah.
And it just didn't seem like he had that. Now, he did go for Forge first. That's an extremely passive way to play the game, unless you're going to cannon rush, which you can if they go pool first. But maybe a gateway opener. Maybe he should try some kind of the weird one-base stuff that Stork actually is pretty well known for. He has been one of the guys that's basically mapped out some of the best one-base builds. But then again, you know, it's Jaedong. This guy was around in the very old days of StarCraft. He's kind of played through all the different eras of Protoss that there is. So he could be, you know, good against pretty much anything. It's going to be tough. We're going to go into a break, guys. When we come back, game 2 here of the Legends match between Stork and Jaedong. Thanks for waiting, everybody. We're back, and we're ready to go into Game 2 here in the show match between Stork and Jaedong. If you missed the first best of 3, Fantasy did defeat Bisu, and I think what many would call an upset, a bit of a surprise. Pretty one-sided games, to be honest. And so Fantasy waits in the finals of the Legends match against one of these two players. We saw Stork, honestly, have a real train wreck of a game in Game 1. That was pretty hard to watch, and I'm worried now going into Game 2 what exactly Stork's going to do because Jaedong looks so strong.
I mean, like, yeah, things went wrong for Stork, right? Like, we talked about the DT that was in the middle of those Hydras, and it did not want to be there. Jaedong brought over a few of these Overlords and just sniped it immediately, and maybe that DT could have been the time that he needed to buy, just holding on for that Storm to finish. The Corsairs, obviously, it was like, hey, there's only one left on the map. Where did the rest go? Those guys can obviously kill some Overlords, like you were just saying to me in the break there. So yeah, just a few steps of the 20-step combination just missing there for Stork, or just didn't go well, and Jaedong absolutely took advantage of him.
Yeah, Jaedong in very good form. I will say, you know, it was really, you know, like in an airplane crash, you actually have to have like 7 or 8 things go wrong on the plane for it to fall out of the sky. You don't just, airplanes don't just fall out of the sky. Well, that game for Stork was like an airplane crashing, where it's like there were the 7 or 8 things that could go wrong to make the game basically stop. It happened there. And you know, I think Stork needs to find a game that is maybe one where he could be a little bit more active and try to find something. Forge into Nexus Cannon is like the most passive way to play. You don't even have attacking units. You have a building that defends you. Maybe we see a gateway expand here in this next one. I think map 2 is Heartbreak Ridge, which is a map that could allow for some creativity here. But anyways, fingers crossed we just have a better game overall.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, if you were watching somebody like a Snow or a Rain, like some absolutely great Protoss, like what kind of stuff do they like to open up with and go to in this matchup?
Well, they like to go gateway first, and then they try to get a read on how many Zerglings are out there. And they're always trying to put pressure on or force Lings to come out, and then they run back. And so I think it's a little bit of a better way to play. But anyways, we're ready to go now into game number 2. In the center left, our Protoss player, one of the 4 legends. He is Stork.
And the legend known as the Tyrant, it is Jaedong over on the right side. Jaedong, absolutely one of the greatest Zergs of all time. Pretty much the greatest Zerg of all time, right?
I would say
like,
so.
Did he achieve Bonjour status, or was it just him and Flash came up at the same time? So any other era, he'd have achieved it, except just Flash coming along?
You know, sometimes it's debated if you're a Bonjour or not, but I mean, I view him as one of the greatest StarCraft 1 players and one of the greatest Zergs of all time. And also, even from a marketing level, he was one of the guys that made the game cool, if that makes sense. You know, there's plenty of pro gamers that are maybe more timid, or, you know, I guess the proper industry term would be not that marketable, right? But Jaedong was somebody who really made the game cool, inspired a lot of players, also broke the game in ways that we weren't really expecting. I mean, mapping out Mutamicro, you know, taking the game to a level that we just never anticipated, being able to abuse units in ways that we hadn't seen before.
I like what you say about the Mutamicro stuff, because, like, you have players like Stork that obviously showcase things that Protoss can do, and then you have these real fast guys that come along and do it better. And, you know, you had players like July Zerg that kind of invented Mutamicro, and then Jaedong's like, hold the phone, you can do that? Yeah. And it's like, okay, I can do that with 2 groups at a time kind of thing. And there's obviously very famous guys.
Now I'm going to have a few years where I just abuse Terrans, and they only make turrets and slowly get chewed up and spat back out by the Zerg.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's still like old tales I remember hearing back when I was like a 15-year-old Warcraft player, and it's like you have Jaedong and Flash that are getting to the finals, and even though they're matched in the finals, it's like to practice for that, they still practice with each other because nobody else was good enough at the time to practice for the other guy, which to me, that is just one of the most amazing things to hear, that you two are so ahead of your field. And it's just like, yeah, we might as well practice against each other because nobody else will do the job.
We actually have the first hatchery coming down a little bit further away from the natural. One thing about this map is there's this high ground area behind. You can see a ramp that leads up there. You could make cannons there. It's not exactly good. Like, it's not like a great play, but it is a thing that I think a lot of Zergs want to just not deal with.
It'll slow you down.
Yeah, and so just to play a safer game. They watch the probe carefully, and when they confirm that it's not going to be over there, they take, make the cannons over there. They just set that third hatch up where the second normally is. So honestly, we have a game that very much mirrors the previous one. We have a game where, it's going to be Forge First. Again, Forge First isn't bad. It's just not an active way to play the game. But let's see if Stork can bring a cleaner game overall here, and one where he's in a healthier state as we start to go into mid-game, where he can try to push and take some fights.
Yeah, I mean, this does tell me that Stork is confident with this style. And like we talked about, even though it's a train wreck of a game, it's because a few things just didn't connect for him. So if he can feel that, if I can make these things happen, if just a few things go my way and I do survive or even get to a good state, like that was my first game on the main stage, let's be real. Maybe I was a bit jittery, a bit nervous. I am a guy that's been around the block for a long time, but I can do this so much better, and that's what I want to show the people.
Yeah, and with the probe being alive still, and notice the layers being made up here. See, he wants to try to show the layer as late as possible. And one thing about this map is the third base is uncomfortably far from the second and the first. But Jaedong's going to play a normal game. Stork is still going to be guessing a little bit. This probe is very, very low. In fact, Jaedong might just be able to actually get it in this little turn over here. Yes, he does.
That is nice by him. 3 bases up and running for Jaedong. Not all yet mining. Obviously getting out of fuelings just to deal with the drone early on. Jaedong did get a scout of what was happening in that front door, and it will be a Stargate again for Stork. And again, those Corsairs are just such a valuable unit. If they do something else, it's very weird, because it's like there's so much to shut things down. If the Zerg goes for a Spire and gets scourged, that's all kind of shuttle play out the window. So you might as well go for Corsair, honestly.
Yeah. And so we've got that second gas finishing. This is a wall, by the way, with the gas, the forge, and the gateway. It's kind of one of the funnier looking entrances, but that is basically a safe wall in. For the Zerg, he's got a couple lings out on the map. Protoss doesn't have a hidden probe. If we could get a shot of the main here for Stork. There it is. Okay, so it's just going to be Stargate and Citadel, which is what we're looking for. So again, a pretty standard game. We didn't see air weapons being upgraded at the cybernetics core. Air weapons, it's a style of play to power up the Corsairs. You can still go get a couple Corsairs and play the game otherwise. And for Jaedong, we just see the hatcheries coming down the den. And so both sides are just focusing on development.
And the drone count is growing at each base here, as you see, and Jaedong might be moving this drone out just to saturate another. I thought he was going to be taking a fourth a little bit aggressively there, and will be a Hydralisk desk on the way, or Hydralisk den on the way for him. Probably an Evo chamber there as well. Can't say it just because his beautiful keyboard is in the way with that dancing hand over there. Soccer players are very fast.
That's a very Brood War-esque keyboard in that the Windows key is broken off. Because in the very early days of the game, you couldn't disable Windows, or at least many pro gamers wouldn't know how to that easily. And so they would pop that key off just by control, and a lot of them still have the key popped off, even though you can just disable it out of comfort.
Habit for sure. Alrighty, first Corsair does get a little bit of damage done. Evo Chamber does eventually start here for Jaedong. One difference with this player is no Spire this game.
That's right.
He's not going to be hunting down these Corsair with the Spire, but hiding these Hydras under these Overlords. And again, you don't want to be taking too much damage on these Corsairs. They are fairly tanky units indeed, but they can last the entire game and just be a real nuisance for the Zerg, because as soon as your Hydralisks are out of position one time, that's it. Your Overlords can take a real beating, and obviously the Corsairs have big splash damage.
So he is going to get air weapons here, although I didn't see another Corsair being made here, but he's getting the Temple Archives out a little bit sooner. Without a Spire, unless we miss that, basically what we are probably going to see here is a Lurker Contain. And so the Lurker Contain is... It's actually a very old way to play, but it's still good. I mean, it's always been around for a reason. Basically, you want to get a bunch of Lurkers. I love this, by the way, to run into the main. This is a real Jaedong move here, and just cause some chaos and slow down what Stork's doing over here.
They do so much damage to units once they get on top of them. Like, obviously, the pathing's a little bit wacky and stuff, but you can really feel that Stork is very worried about these, but he's reacting very calmly. But as soon as they touch probes, man, they are just popping.
Yeah,
that's a big attack.
Yeah, the Zealots are going to come forward here. The Corsairs are damaging these Overlords. And I got to say, I mean, the scary part is the Zealots keep hitting. Okay, I think he backs up. I was going to say, you kill off a couple Overlords, you can already see Jaedong's supply blocked. So if you lose a lot more Hydras, you just can't remake them. It's pretty scary. But Jaedong's doing a great job with these few lings that he has. It looks like he's going to send one probe to try to one-shot the one weaker Zergling, and he mistargets it. He didn't click on the right one.
Oh my, I mean, this is really slowing down Stork a lot. Like, the gas income, absolutely shot for him. And I mean, okay, I don't know how many probes died in total. Maybe a good, like, 5, 6 there from those Zerglings, but the defense from Jaedong also very good. Utilizing the 2 buildings there with the gap, so those Zealots could not attack more than 1 Hydralisk at a time. Very nice by him. But those Overlords that were all over there, okay, he's got the speed upgrade, so he can actually juke and jive where these Corsairs go. And you do see Jaedong is trying to do just that a little bit.
Notice he didn't get the 5 Corsairs because he realizes there's no threat of Mutas, so he just stops at 3. But Protoss is going to try to come out here and generate a threat. And sometimes the way to look at this, if you're not familiar with the matchup, is to think of them just like they're vultures. The Zealots, like they can hit stuff, they can run away. Oh no, it happened again! Dude. Oh my gosh, he lost 2 more Corsairs. Now, it's not like Mutas are in play here, so it's not the worst thing that could happen, but it's pretty bad. You just don't want to be giving up units like that this early on in the game.
No, you don't. And Stork has definitely lost a lot of his map presence here. Like, the Zealots getting caught out by this massive flock of Hydras, but I don't think this is enough to win this game, because it feels like Stork has got to a point where he's got a lot of cannons, he is defensively set up and stuff, but it does look like he does have Storm available, and he's feeling like he can move out now. Now, this is the long trek across the map, and even though maps can feel pretty small in a way, they're also huge, and these Hydras move around very quickly with the speed upgrade.
Yeah, and they're a real threat, but it's important to note that Stork is now moving out on the map here. And I think he's got a much healthier set of units than we saw before. We want to watch for those storms. Oh no, I think this one Templar, okay, he does at least get the Psy Storm off, and he actually manages to save it surprisingly. So it was a moment that it looked like it could have been really bad, but he basically recovers. If he can keep these Zealots just out of arm's reach here of these Hydras and kind of stay back, he can control the map, especially over on a high ground area like this.
I was just about to say, it may not look like it, but there's so much different terrain here where if you're on the high ground against these Hydralisks, they're missing like a good 30% of the time or something like that, which is absolutely crazy. It really mitigates their damage. And Jaedong is growing. Lots more hatcheries coming online. I just saw a good 1k minerals being spent on something. And look at his supply here, Nick. Like, his supply has been absolutely growing here. And the Hydra count's crazy. Corsair number 3 does go down, so no more scouting for Stork at this position either.
I think Mutas are coming.
You do?
Yeah, I think there's, I might be wrong, but we did see a Spire in the top right. I would not be shocked if suddenly all of these eggs are full of Mutalisks. We're gonna find out. There it is. So, because the Corsairs were picked off here and there, the Mutas can just now pick off Templars. And so this is why, even if the Corsairs aren't killing a lot, you don't want to lose them. Because a couple Corsairs can basically, just like a couple of Phoenixes can in StarCraft 2, they can at least address the Mutalisks and force you to respect them.
Even to greater effect in this game, right? Like, the hard counters are so hard. Like, you land a Storm combined with some Corsairs, like, you don't even make the Mutas, but here, he does fly in, and, I mean, Goons are being made at this point, quite a lot of Goons, so he does have some anti-air in the mix, but these bases are very vulnerable, and it's hard to get back into your base as a Protoss player, because, you know, you've got a lot of buildings in the way, but Stork does evacuate pretty damn nicely, but Jaedong would not be Jaedong if he didn't know how to control Mutas very nicely.
And Dragoons can beat... Oh, man. Dragoons can beat Mutalisks, but the thing is, the Mutalisks can just run away. And Dragoons don't fire that fast either, so the Mutas don't ever take that much damage. It's pretty rare to see in a group of Mutalisks like the Dragoons naturally all target one Muta and kill it in time. And so Stork, especially with these Mutas out, is in a bit of a problem. He's remaking Corsairs. Sometimes if you're down on Corsairs, you'll see a Dark Archon made and they'll try to Maelstrom and catch the Mutas. But
to like stun them all, right? Or basically lock them in position.
Right, and then maybe you can kill them with Corsairs or Dragoons or maybe even one Storm, but I think we're kind of past that point, right? And so Stork, I mean, he's going to be safe back at home, but the problem is that he can't attack. Usually when you're on this many gateways, this is when you try to move out on the map and start taking fights. And instead, we're in a game where it's kind of hard to do any of that stuff because the reality is the Mutas are still a threat. You know, funnily enough, he actually is going to try to target down Dragoons, just see what kind of value he can get. But the 4 Templars that are just hugging the pylon to the left of the screenshot, those Templars have to be covered. if Protoss wins a fight, it'll be off the additional damage that is done by those 4 Templars.
Absolutely. Observer here showing us that these Hydras are on +2, and that is a lot of lurkers joining the field. These Lings, not necessarily the greatest damage dealers in these big fights, but a lot of good fodder, stopping these lurkers from getting truly pounced on. And if these Lings do get engaged, or they do get on top of those High Templars pop like second to none.
That's right. It's pretty scary to try to deal with. The mutas are going to come in again, and he just wants to see if he can fish any of this back here. One cannon does not need to be respected, Ben, and so he's going to take that. And now I think we're in a game where it seems like Stork is just going to try to YOLO it up across the map. This is usually not a good sign, by the way.
Usually not a good sign, and being greeted by that many lurkers on the high ground especially, I mean, that is a scary Zerg army. And
oh my God, he got the observer. Oh, so he can't even see it.
He can't even move up the ramp. He can't do it. I mean, like, he can storm this, but these lurkers are spread so nicely that even storms, they're not going to do the job, honestly.
Yeah. Well, you know, the Achilles heel of the Protoss army when you're going for lurkers and turtling is the observer. If you can just snipe that observer and slow him down, it is huge. And so we can see Stork is going to try to go around that, as he probably has another observer inbound here. It's a big map. Here's that observer I was talking about. But is there going to be an opening?
I mean, even if
Jaedong's maxed out.
Yeah, and he's going to go for that neutral, or thinking like, oh, you don't have a third? I know you're absolutely all in with this attack now. So maneuvering, and oh my goodness, he even has a lot of lurkers over here too. This is kind of a disaster for Stork, because I don't know what he's meant to do here. Another High Templar does go down. I heard a little scream go on.
Yeah, this is a 15-minute maxed out Zerg, actually even less than 15 minutes. And there's just no damage being done at all over here. And I think, frankly, there's just no way that the Protoss is ever going to get through here. In fact, he's got another set of units behind this. I mean, Jaedong is just dominating over here. You could see as Stork thinks he might be getting close from behind the Lings, and the mutas come up, the lurkers come and burrow, and we may actually see him tap out here in GG.
I mean, this is a horror story if you're a Protoss player. Like, this whole army just got absolutely enveloped over here, and he is chasing him down with lurkers. He's not even using the static D anymore, just absolutely sending Stork packing, and he does not have the eco behind this. Remember, he lost so many pros to these mutas. Great play out of Jade on this game, and eventually these observers join the field, but oh,
there it is.
GG, well played.
Whoa. Whoa. You guys know the song?
Absolutely destroyed.
He got smashed. I can't believe it. But I better believe it. You better believe it at home. Jaedong wins that 2-0 in just a fantastic fashion. And we've had these two very one-sided games in the round of 4 here for the Legends match, which means we should have a pretty epic finals. Jaedong going up against Fantasy here in a best-of-5 coming up next.
Yeah, I mean, like, they both won in very different ways as well, right? Like, Fantasy came in with these very, very well-planned and well-executed timing attacks, whereas this series was all about, I'm going to survive, weather the storm, almost quite literally, but just play a solid macro game. So I'm looking forward to see how those styles clash and whether Fantasy is actually going to bring out timing attacks against Jaedong as well.
Yeah, Jaedong looked to be in very good form. It was very clean. He really wasn't weak at any moment.
No.
Stork did have a hard time. I think we should respect the fact that Stork tried to go head-to-head against the Dong himself, but the reality is that Jaedong made it look so easy, made it almost look like there was never a moment ever that Stork would be able to win. We're going to go to an interview now here with Jaedong and see how he's feeling. He's going on to the finals against Fantasy here in the Brood Wars Legends match.
Jaedong, an impressive match, and so wonderful to see you back on stage like this. Tell me a little bit about your intentions for this tournament. Did you come in here just to dominate?
이번 대 이기려고 결심했어요.
Of course.
Jaedong, you've been so good for so long. You said this year you're absolutely going to be trying your best. Where does that passion come from?
이번 해 스타크래프트 제일 대답할
네. 제가 이제 군대 갔다 와서 브루도어를 굉장히 열심히 하고 있는데 점점 조금씩 기량이 올라오고 있는 것 같아서 그래서 그런 부분에 있어서 제가 좀 더 동기부여를 또 삼을 수 있고 또 많이 팬분들께서 응원해 주시기 때문에 그래서 열심히 할 수 있는 것 같아요. 네.
So I think because of how the fans are cheering for me, after the military service, I wanted to try again, and I got the passion for it, so I wanted to challenge myself more.
زي ما تشوفون اعزائنا المشاهدين جيدونغ بعد فوزه في المباراه سالناه السؤال الاول اذا هو جاي عشان يفوز البطوله يقول اي فعلا انا جاي عشان افوز البطوله، لكن في سؤالنا الثاني سالناه اذا هو من وين يجيب الباشن حقه اصلا انه يقدر ينافس بعد كل هالسنين. يقول صراحه انا بعد ما خلصت من الميلتري سيرفيس حقتي قلت انه اوكي انا ودي اني احاول اني ارجع مره ثانيه وعندي الباشن للشيء هذا فليش لا، وهذا الان موجود عندنا في المسرح.
Well, back in the day, Jaedong, you had quite a rivalry against Fantasy. What do you feel going up against him in the next matchup?
사실 굉장히 오래전에 경기를 했었기 때문에 판타지 선수랑 그래서 너무 재밌을 것 같고요. 이렇게 큰 무대에서 또 하게 돼서 기대가 많이 됩니다.
So it's been a really long time since I went against Fantasy, and to do it on a big stage, I think it's going to be very fun, and I'm looking forward to it.
زي ما تشوفون في السؤال اللي بعده في المقابلة تكلمنا عن موضوع انه الان بما انه تأهل خلاص الان بيروح ضد فانتسي في الفاينل، فالسؤال كان لكم فترة طويلة انكم ما واجهتوا بعض فوش شعورك تجاه هذه المباراة؟ كان يقول انه صراحة يعني فعلا لنا فترة جدا طويلة هنا ما نافسنا على مسرح كبير، واليوم انا مرة متحمس اني اشوف المباراة هذه وصراحة اشوف انها بتكون مرة ممتعة.
Well, as you said, Jaedong, it has been a while since you played against him on a stage like this, but thinking back in time, is there a particular match or a particular game against him that most gets you ready to beat him?
그 예전에 그 어떤 게임이 제일 기억이 남는지 있는 거예요?
어떤 게임이요?
네. 기억이 남는 게임.
제가 결승전에서 이겼던 경기가 기억이 남네요.
I think it's going to be the final that I won in it. This is the game that I recall and I remember often.
سألنا جيدونغ إذا فيه مباراة معينة يقدر إنه يتذكرها بينه وبين فانتسي يكون بينهم يعني هيستوري جدا كبير وهو أكثر شيء هايلايت بالتاريخ حقهم. كان يقول إنه فعلا قد مرة من المرات قد تواجهنا في الفاينل كانت هذه أكثر مباراة أنا ممكن إني أتذكرها عن فانتسي.
So you're holding a victory against him in your mind, manifesting this next victory. It's not an old loss that's firing you up. That's just like the winner's mindset that Jaedong is going to be carrying into the finals. It's going to be a best of 5. But before we get into that, let's take a look at the match he just played.
فانتسي جاهز ان ينتظر في الجراند فاينل الجيدونغ، والان بيروح على طول من المحللين يتكلم عن المباراه هذه لانه اخر مره تواجهوا الفاينل سمعتوها منه يقول انه هو فاز في هذه المباراه، فالان هل بيقدر يفوز في البست اوف 5 الجايه عندنا؟ هذا اللي راح نشهده، بس اول شيء استوديو التحليلي.
Thank you on the stage. Yes, Jaedong with a pretty dominant performance coming in here against Stork, taking it 2-0 to get things rolling into that final. Joining me, ZG, as well as Dan, to talk about this. Jess, I mean, Jaedong looked fantastic here. I mean, considering especially how he was just able to completely swarm Stork there towards the very end. Stork didn't have many options.
Yeah, the Tyrant really came to play, you know. Even at the end, you could see that he still had the Jaedong stare at the end. You know, he's very serious when he does it, and then he gets on an interview and he's all happy and smiling. But he was the favorite coming into this. I'm, pretty sure about that. Jaedong, definitely one of the best Zerg players of all time, but also really rather good nowadays.
Yeah.
And just, I think everyone said that he was favored versus Stork, but to be this favored, to be this dominant, I mean, clearly he's going to be ready to face Fantasy in the finals.
Yeah, it seems so. Polypoid was pretty quick here, but Heartbreak Ridge, Dan, went a little bit longer.
Yeah. Stork definitely went into Heartbreak Ridge with a different plan. Didn't really get busted before Storm or anything, and was really looking to just kind of hit a strong timing attack. But Jaedong's defense was very strong. These Mutalist counterattacks, specifically, like those really ruined Stork from getting any other plan. Like sometimes you can make an army like this and be like, all right, let's take a third. But when you're taking that much economic damage, that's not going to work out. So I think Jaedong, really, especially here in game number 2, played really a magnificent one.
I mean, how do you even deal with what? With all these Dragoons, and now he was trying to even break through that. He only had himself one observer. I don't know how you're able to break through what Jaedong had there. But anyway, we have ourselves Fantasy and Jaedong finding themselves in the finals after what we've been hearing about Fantasy in terms of him being #1 on ladder, Jess, and also looking so good against Bisu, actually. I'm kind of excited for this finals.
Yeah, he's clearly playing very well. The ladder already said that, but then to also look so good versus Bisu. I mean, he's clearly come prepared, and I think he was also a little bit more in the benefit that he maybe could have guessed. Yeah, sorry. Could have guessed that Jaedong was going to get through.
Yeah.
Or again, the opposite could not quite be said. So I think Jaedong is going to have like kind of an odd moment where he's like, oh yeah, you know, ZVT, but then he's going to be fine. But then Fantasy is like, this is exactly what I hoped would happen, basically, when I prepared for this.
Dan, final thoughts on that series?
You know, it was pretty dominant by Jaedong. Stork is still a great player.
Yeah.
He does have a little bit of a harder time and always has against Zerg. A lot of Protosses do. But still should be well respected. And, you know, it didn't work out for him this time, but Jaedong Fantasy is going to be a great finals.
Absolutely. Best of 5. Looking forward to it here as we are going to a short break. And when we return, we have that finals for the Brood War Legends on the way. Jaedong versus Fantasy. Don't go anywhere.